Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our new board chair, Tammy Garrison, and all of our TEMPO Milwaukee board members, we welcome you to today's June program meeting, and most importantly, our past president's luncheon. So it's really great to see so many people here. This is kind of a big deal. We've got legacy of leadership within this room. We've got some cameras. We are broadcasting this live. No, I'm just kidding. We're not broadcasting it live. But certainly we wanted to capture the excitement and the stories that will be shared from the legacy of women leaders in this room, and so that we can pass on those lessons in leadership with future generations of TEMPO Milwaukee. So thank you all for being here. In 1975, 4 women came together and saw the opportunity to form TEMPO Milwaukee with the idea of advancing women leaders in this community. So fast forward 42 years later, we are still committed to mentoring, we're committed to networking, and we're committed to outstanding leadership made possible in large part to our past presidents, many of whom are with us today. So we are certainly in for a special treat as we gather 5 of our past presidents, each representing a decade of this organization, to really share their best practices, to share their experiences, to share their journey with TEMPO Milwaukee over the last 42 years. So will be a great panel discussion moderated by Tammy Garrison, so we're really excited for that. Along with these 6 phenomenal women, I am honored to introduce 17 of our past presidents with us today. So I am going to acknowledge, and if you can please stand when I call your name, that will be great. Beginning with Carla Butenhoff. Carla. Marilyn Vollrath. Colleen Henderson. Colleen. Mary Alice Tierney. Ellie Pick. Ellie Pick. Where? There she is. Peg Fenney. Ann Curley. Mary Ellen Stanek. Lynn Pearson. Susie Stein. Where's Susie? Oop, Susie didn't make it. Joanne Ratchison. Tracy Klein. Did I see Tracy? Phyllis King. Jennifer Bartolotta. Peggy Williams-Smith. Linda Newberry-Ferguson. And our past chair, most recent past chair, board chair, Jane Ladio. Thank you all. Another round of applause for all that they have done. We are so very thankful to have you as our honored guest today, and thank you for your continued commitment to this organization and for your outstanding leadership. So really wonderful. Just before I go into, we're going to bring up Shontra Powell here in just a second, but I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. On your table, you will see a long list of upcoming items. I think Marta and I thought that, you know what, the summer months will kind of like ease out. No, that's not the case at all. So beginning with a professional development series next Friday, then we have our Women's Affinity Alliance, followed by our golf outing on July 31st. So I hope all you can make that as well. We are also joint program with Professional Dimensions and Milwaukee Women, Inc. in September with our honored guest, the Milwaukee Bucks, so talking about innovation in Milwaukee. So a really great panel that we've brought together for that. And then finally rounding out in October with our leadership event. So we have just confirmed our speaker, who is Porter Gale. She is the former Chief Marketing Officer of Virgin America. So please join us on October 12th for our leadership event. There are still opportunities for sponsorships, and we will welcome them. So, so if you have any want to register or any additional details about any of these events, please go to our tempomilwaukee.org site and sign up. At this time, I'm going to welcome Shontra Powell, board member, to share a little bit about our strategic plan with us. Sorry, one other thing. TEMPO directories, they're available. If you haven't grabbed them, please do so. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You all look lovely, and I'm sure you're enjoying the sun rays. It just has a way of setting our mood, doesn't it? Yeah, so exciting program, and I have been very clear that I will not belabor the fact that we're all here to enjoy and celebrate our past presidents and the conversation that goes with. But we didn't want to miss the point that I believe really honors the past presidents, and that's drawing attention to the incredible work that has been done by many of you to get us focused on our strategic plan. So over a year ago, or just about a year ago, about this time of year, a half day was spent where we convened a group of members, EWL members, partners, associates, to talk about what should TEMPO look like in the year of 2020. Many of you worked on various workshops and planning committees. Can I just ask you to stand if you were a part of that monumental experience about a year ago? Thank you so much for your selfishness and being a part of the experience and your insights shared. I want to give a special thanks, I was reminded to do so, to Mark, Jim, Bridget, Janet, Janine, and Ann. Thank you for your leadership and your support and your partnership with TEMPO. Without you, we would not have been as successful getting ourselves through such an important conversation. So we really appreciate you. With that, under the support of these partners, as discussed at our annual meeting and as reviewed in our annual report, we've started our journey. We've identified leaders for all of the committees, and those leaders are well on their way to focus on our 4 key tenets. The first one being to preserve our core and stimulate growth. The second one being diversity and inclusion. Next being collaboration. And last being member engagement. For each of these committees, we've now identified a committee chair as well as a board liaison. And I can tell you that the energy and conversation is up and running, off and running. And the level of serious consideration that's going to each of the pillars, I think you'd all be very impressed with. I myself have had the privilege to convene a discussion around collaboration. So collaboration in very short terms is essentially this notion that there are several organizations within the greater Milwaukee area that are focused on similar themes to our mission, and that is the advancement of women leaders in our community. And with that in mind, we thought it makes a lot of sense to think about scale and leverage of that conversation. So with very thoughtful and specific focus, we've gathered this initiative to do just as it says, to strengthen our leadership position in advancing women leaders, but then to do that by deepening our collaboration and conversation with partners around the community, around the topic. So as ambiguous as all of that sounds, the committee, if we advance the slides, who's doing that? Or am I doing that? Excellent. And I can do that. The committee, there you go, yeah. The committee that's been convened, so myself have served as board liaison, and I'm very pleased to announce that Mary Bagoon will be the committee chair ongoing. Our early conversations have included other board members, Linda Mertz, Marilyn Krause, Linda Kohler, and now we have extended that to include other members. We have EWL members to include Brooke and Ann, and then other TEMPO members, so Beth Healy, Sharon Reed, and I believe that is it. That's it, that will be joining the group. So super excited to have them and the energy to the conversation, and then we can advance. So the 3 focus areas, getting very quick to the punch. The first is alliance. So this underscores the fact that there are organizations that in the life cycle of growing women leaders in our community that are actively engaged and participating in this conversation daily. How do we all leverage the best that we each offer and work collectively to bring that to bear in achieving our mission, our individual mission statements? So organizations like Professional Dimensions, Milwaukee Women Inc., as well as TEMPO, are sitting at a table meeting periodically to just talk about what we do, talk about our mission, our vision, our priorities, and how we can support one another in being successful in our individual goals. The second one, affiliates, recognizes the fact that not only do we have TEMPO Greater Milwaukee area, but we've also seen that brand grow and extend itself to places like Madison, Washington County, Racine, Kenosha, and we even heard rumblings of maybe an Ozaki in there somewhere. The idea and the vision here is to make sure that as we go out in the communities, the various communities, and talk about TEMPO and represent the name TEMPO, that we are on one accord, that we're doing our very best to support one another, again, in achieving those mission statements that may be very locally, regionally driven, however, making sure that we uphold at all costs the brand of TEMPO that was visioned as the inception of the organization. And then the last is about centers of influence. Well, this is really about you. When you look at the collective membership of TEMPO, we represent expertise in just about any function, any industry, any geography. You can keep going, right? And so this is how do we make sure that when the call comes to us, and we have the ability to put our members and our organization on the stage as a voice of influence. With that, we will move on to the next pillar, and that is to be shared with us by Sara Alger. And she's going to speak about the preserving our core, stimulating growth. Welcome, Sara.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sara Alger, and I have been selected to chair the Preserve Our Core, Stimulate Growth pillar committee. And I felt that the objectives here were pretty solid. They're just who we are. Really we need to, when we're thinking in this committee, we need to really think about who we are to the core, truly. The executive women, CEOs and leaders in the Milwaukee area, and how do we continue to grow that group and strengthen and deepen who we are. And then in addition, I'm just summing up all these bullets for you, but in addition, really how we're looking at our financial future too. Jen, can you just move on? Thanks. So this is our great committee made up of, again, several different people. Myself, Chris Best, Mary Beth Cottrell, Jen Dirks, Jane Ladio, Jody Lowe, Emily Phillips, Joanne Ratchison, Jordan Spillane, and Ann Wolfall are our EWL members as well. So our 3 focus areas, we decided from those four bullets of the different objectives really came down to 3 different subcommittees. One was focused on investment strategies, which really is, with the dollars that we have collected over the years, how do we really invest in our future financially? And so we have our financial experts on the committee to help us out with that. All the way from what is the policy that we need to create, and how does that align with our core components at TEMPO. The second one is around revenue opportunities, and that really is looking again at both the TEMPO Foundation and TEMPO Milwaukee overall. So Jody has done a really great job in working with the foundation and establishing criteria and looking at a process to distribute grants out to the community to women entrepreneurs and other women that are looking to continue and further their education and their careers. And so there's more to come about that in the future. And then once we've really gotten that foundation piece established, it's looking at other revenue opportunities and what's really our fundraising strategy for both the organization overall as well as the foundation. And finally, the membership, mentorship, and sponsorship. As Jen mentioned earlier in her opening she talked about, the mentorship and the networking that this organization has really been about, and what we need to do to continue those relationships. And so while we need to stay true to our core in being a solid member and mentoring and networking both with our newer members of the EWL, as well as networking with one another and helping to advance our careers and our objectives out in the community, we also want to be able to evolve into something else and champion one another and sponsor one another as we continue to grow with ourselves and as an organization. So I don't know who's next. I don't remember. Who's next? Diversity inclusion. Erin Hareng will be up here to discuss that. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Hareng. Thanks for having me here. I am actually having the pleasure of chairing the diversity inclusion arm, and we have a very fun committee, which I'll get to. One of the reasons we are so passionate about this being part of our strategic plan is that, looking back at all the past presidents here today, I think of what spurred them to lead, to start this organization, and it was about the barriers that existed against women and the barriers that exist today. So if anyone reads their TEMPO e-newsletter, and there's all these articles on the bottom, if you read them religiously like I do, as you should be, there are still you're welcome. There's still barriers today that are very obvious and not very obvious. And we know that the barriers facing you, depending on who you are, where you come from, and what you're doing, may change. And so we want to look at what that lens looks like and how TEMPO is activating the mentorship, the networking, and the elevating of all women, no matter where they come from. So we asked you to identify some data to just give us a starting point. Of the TEMPO members, we know that 94% of us identify as white. And so we understand that, and the committee is looking at that to go forward. And one of the things, if anyone was here for the Nancy Hernandez chat a few months back, she talked about the differences in diversity and inclusion. And while both are a focus of this committee, one of the things that we want to look at is inclusion, specifically this year. So if you Google inclusion, which I did yesterday, there's lots of definitions, but I came with my favorite. Inclusion is recognizing that we are one, even though that we are not the same. Fighting for inclusion also involves assuring that all support systems are available to those who need such support. So our committee will be looking at how is TEMPO inclusive of every lens that we have represented, or every lens that we want represented to elevate women in the best way possible. So moving on to the committee, we've got a great team here that has worked really hard to start the foundation of this and to start moving forward on how we're going to activate inclusion. But I want you to look at the very last committee member, and it's you. And inclusion starts with all of us. And so we're going to have a lot of fun throughout the year finding ways to involve all of us to be a very inclusive organization and elevate all women. So thank you. And I don't know who I'm introducing. So. Rose, come on up here.
Good afternoon. I'm Rose Spano, Iannelli, and I have the pleasure of being the board liaison to the Engagement Committee, which is exactly what it sounds like. Our goal is to continue to increase engagement of all of our TEMPO members. So the good news is we have a highly engaged group of members here at TEMPO, and we've had very good retention throughout the years. But what we're trying to do is really take a look at creating a baseline membership data point of where we are right now and where we can continue to improve and grow from an engagement perspective. So this is our committee, and I'm working closely with Karen Von Rearden, who is chairing the committee, and Julie Cashman, who is also the co-chair. And you can see it's a fairly large group of great women that are committed to making sure that we continue to meet the needs of all of our TEMPO members. And what we have begun to do is to actually measure what engagement looks like. And the way that we've done that and the approach that we've taken is really looking at attendance. It's the very baseline thing that we can easily measure. and understand how many activities that our TEMPO members are participating in. We have a very large inventory of touch points that our members can participate in, and so we've gone through all 300 plus members and identified on the continuum which members that we tend to see a little bit more often and which members we might want to see more often. And as our committee continues to progress, we've also looked at other data points where we can possibly improve and other ways that we can measure. So we understand that membership and engagement is something that changes as somebody goes through the course of their life, and they can come in and out of being able to participate more actively at different points in their life, and we just want to better understand that. The other area we're looking at very closely is communication. Measuring engagement through communication. We have a very robust communication committee at TEMPO, and we'll be working very closely with those individuals to measure things like the analytics of our website, how many of you are actually opening up those emails, and what can we do to increase communication and make sure that our members are actually receiving the information that we're providing to them. So the first action point we're going to take is reach out to what we perceive as being a group of members that are kind of not as present physically in some of our various activities. And the way that we will do that is we will physically reach out to them and ask them a series of a couple different questions to understand if TEMPO is really providing the value to their membership that they hope to receive or that they expect from us, and if there's any types of activities that we could change or alter that would cause them to be more engaged than they currently are. So I don't think anybody in this room will necessarily hear from us. Maybe you will, but if you do, know that it's in just the absolute best intentions to just learn more about our members and how we can better serve them moving forward. And one of the other areas that we're looking at are our new members that are coming into the organization. And for those of us who sponsor new members, we're really working to understand how we can help communicate to you the level of engagement that those new members are really participating in as somebody who has sponsored them into the organization. So you can help shepherd them along and perhaps help them if there are areas that they don't feel as comfortable in, and just give us that feedback as a committee. So that's pretty much it. Before we go on with your lunch, I just would like to thank all of the volunteers and the members of the board and the committee members for putting their time onto this important project and making sure that TEMPO continues to meet the expectations of our members, that we continue to be relevant and have a high impact both in our membership and in the community. Thank you.
So just before one final, I forgot, but Jim Miller, one of our partners here with TEMPO Milwaukee, has graciously offered up 2 tickets to tomorrow's U.S. Open. Very cool. So we are going to walk around. If you are interested in being part of this raffle, we will walk around and collect your business cards. So get them handy, and then we'll be back shortly to begin our program. Thank you.
Okay. Are you with me, TEMPO Milwaukee? Hello, yay! Excellent, good, welcome. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with our panel discussion. Couple things this afternoon. So you guys all know that I love learning from all of you, and I learned something new 2 weeks ago at the Biz Times Women in Business Breakfast. Kimberly Kane was the moderator. And she was a little bit concerned about how she was going to get all the questions from the group. So she gave out her cell phone, and people could text in questions to her. So we thought, well, let's try that today, TEMPO. So, and now you all have my cell phone. If you would like to give me any feedback at any time, please, just for the next hour, let's keep it to questions for our panel. Right. If you want beer, I'm your girl. Thank you, Peggy. And then I'm going to tell them how to get into the safe house. So we'll tip for tat on that one. And I'm going to try to, between all the Erin Hills updates and everything else exciting in the world that's going on. But seriously, send me your text messages if you have questions. I'll do my best to either work them into the questions as we go or wait until the end to do that. Also want to give a quick shout out to our friends at MATC who are here behind the cameras. Thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. This is not going out live and interrupting the U.S. Open broadcast. However, it is going to be taped for everybody to view later, and our TEMPO members that weren't able to hear can learn at another time from our group. So thank you for that. So let's do introductions really quickly, and then we'll get into questions. First, I want to start with Marilyn Vollrath, who was TEMPO president from 1978 to 79, and she's executive vice president of Reputation Partners. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Mary Alice Tierney, who was TEMPO president from 1982 to 1983, and she's a talent management consultant and executive coach at Right Management. Yes, welcome, Mary Alice. Thank you. All the way at the end, looking lovely in her white, Mary Ellen Stanek. You might recognize her from the cover of the Biz Times issue this week, looking wonderful. So excited to have you here, Mary Ellen. She was TEMPO president from 1996 to 97, and she's managing director at Robert W. Baird. Welcome. And Phyllis King, TEMPO president from 2006 to 2007, and she's vice provost at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Welcome, Phyllis. Thank you for being here. And Peggy Williams-Smith, who is going to be honored tomorrow as a woman of influence. Incredibly exciting. She led us through a critical stage in our TEMPO leadership, and she was president from 2013 to 2014, and she is executive vice president of Safe House Restaurants for Marcus. Woo. Very excited. Welcome. Thank you. So the first question I'm going to actually toss down to Mary Ellen, because this was something that came up in the Biz Times article that features Mary Ellen, and I highly encourage you to grab an issue and read about it. Some great nuggets from Mary Ellen about how she got to where she is and her leadership role. So one of the things that you mentioned was mentors and sponsors, and we all know it's critically important. It's part of our mission to ensure that we're mentoring others and sponsoring others. And so did you have a sponsor or a mentor who helped advance you in your career, and can you kind of provide details of how they did that and how it helped you?
Turn it on. Here, use this one. I have it on. I think I'm on. There I am. Sorry. I would say yes to both. I had a number of mentors, a number of sponsors along the way. The sponsors, I would say, played very defined, specific roles when opportunities came up, whether it be for an opportunity for a promotion or an opportunity for a potential board seat. So real clear cut there. The mentors, I would say, and this is not just a gratuitous comment, but this is why I would do anything for TEMPO, because TEMPO and so many of these women that I've known for so long were peer-to-peer mentors. And it was so invaluable to me personally, and really down to the tips of my toes in terms of helping ground me. I found professional friendships and personal friendships when I was trying to juggle a lot of balls, when I was trying to figure it all out. A lot of times I was the only woman in the room or the only person who was a dual career trying to juggle a lot of balls and trying to figure out how I was going to do it. And a lot of the TEMPO friendships and members were very, very supportive, and I would call them mentors. We also coincidentally worked on developing the mentorship program, the very early. You've had many, many iterations since. So that was really clear-cut when I look back. And then career-wise, I would say there were specific mentors. I would call them more of my personal board of directors. And some of them come in and out, and some of them our newer, younger members who have come along the way. So.
Great, thank you. And actually, I'm going to kind of toss this to Peggy and Phyllis a little bit. A similar role. Marilyn just kind of talked about peer-to-peer networking, and which kind of also sometimes evolves into your friendships, into your squad and your crew. So you guys have a friendship that exists outside of TEMPO. Can you speak a little bit to that and maybe where that came from and how it helps you in your careers?
Well, Phyllis was president my first year on the board of TEMPO. I had been tapped through Nancy Hernandez, who's my personal mentor. She was my boss. I worked with her at Marcus. And Nancy was an amazing leader, not just a woman leader, just an amazing leader. She fostered an open environment in everything she did, and she always made sure to give credit where credit was due and brought you in. So when she left Marcus, she joined TEMPO, and she thought it was an amazing network of women, and she immediately reached out to me and asked me to be a part of it. And I was so busy with what I thought was more important in my work role that I ignored her for a year, and she kept going, and she kept going, and she said, you really need to join this organization. And I joined as Phyllis was becoming president and had a dinner at her house for every board, past, present board, member of the board. And Phyllis and I just clicked, and she's been an amazing mentor to me as well.
Well, thank you, Peggy, and I think and same as well. I think what you find with TEMPO, and if you haven't all found it already, you will. Tremendous friendships and tremendous networking, and I think for Peggy and myself, you share a lot in TEMPO because you have a lot in common, and that's hopefully one of the reasons why you joined the organization. Is that you're female? We're all female professionals in leadership roles, and there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to understand. There's a lot to share. And there's a lot that you can gain from networking and advice that you can't always get out there in your own jobs. And so there's a little bit of a safe environment, I would say, here. And so I know as well, I will, with Peggy and actually with the other TEMPO presidents, the TEMPO presidents bond, I think because of that specific role as well, and how you navigate that role and how that role plays out and how you need each other, and how I think I know the presidents that were before and after me. I've consulted them a lot, and I still do. And I think one of the things you'll find is that you have lifelong friendships here. One of the greatest things you can do is network here in TEMPO.
Great, thank you. Mary Alice, I'm going to turn this question over to you, okay? So we've, as we've talked about, TEMPO has gone through many transformations over the decades. In particular, we've just been through quite a large one with restructuring our organization and our board. So I'm curious to hear from you, do women-only organizations like TEMPO, are they still critical for female professionals? Do we need to move to a new model? Are we talking to ourselves too much? Kind of, how do you feel about that?
I, in full disclosure, specifically asked for this question.
I thought I had prompted it so perfectly. Like,
you did.
I just
you
totally
did.
Out of the air.
I couldn't help.
Genius.
I've always been transparent with my fellow TEMPO members. So. And the reason is that this is fundamental. I mean, this is the conversation about the relevance of this organization. So I'm going to take a few minutes, if I may, to walk through, and I made some notes, but I'm not going to make a speech, I promise. TEMPO was established to provide us with networks that we didn't have in our workplaces or in the business community. We just didn't. I mean, as Mary Ellen said, many of us were the only woman executive in our companies, and the guys weren't ready to include us in their networks, or maybe it didn't even occur to them. But that was the situation when TEMPO was established. It's different now, of course. We have access to lots of networks now. But my question is, why would you not want this network? I mean, this is a network of top executives from the major corporations and the key business areas in this business community. And it's our network. We built it. It's designed for us. Why would you not want to have that and to be able to access that. The other thing is that TEMPO is an institution now. I mean, I did want to point out that most of us were 12 when we were president, just so you know. But, you know, we've been around for a while. It's an institution. It's highly regarded, influential. TEMPO is a leader. And TEMPO and its members are often called on for thought leadership in this business community. So in my opinion, TEMPO is critically important to the vitality and the growth and the future and the success of this business community. And there's one other reason. Let's be perfectly frank about this. There's something wonderfully special and fun about spending a few hours every month with other women executives. We support one another. We learn from one another. We get one another. So let me turn it around and ask you a couple of questions. How many of you have ever or are now mentoring and helping emerging women leaders? Raise your hands. High, proudly. How many of you think that's important for us to do? Of course. You know the mission and the vision of TEMPO. Do you think we can abandon those things? Have we reached the point where women are fully equal in all levels and all ways and all places of leadership? How many of you think that's the case? So I believe I've made the case for the relevance of TEMPO in our community.
I was really grateful for that. Marilyn, I'm gonna turn to you as our most sage.
I did join TEMPO when I was 23. I really was.
So I think maybe you have the best line of sight to this, having watched TEMPO grow up. You watched us grow up over these years. I'm curious what you think currently our biggest opportunity and our biggest challenge is as an organization.
I think the opportunity that we have is that there are so many really talented women in companies in management and executive roles. Mary Alice had mentioned back in the day, you know, when TEMPO was started, there was only 1 or 2 women who weren't a secretary or some kind of a clerk with a professional title, and we had no one in our company. Who do you hang out with? You're not going to hang out with the guys because you're not part of their group. And you're not going to hang out with the secretaries because you don't want to be perceived as one of those because you're a professional. So we had nowhere to go. And that's why TEMPO was just so wonderful, because we all understood where we all were, and we could support each other and just do things together. And I think that's the opportunity we have now. It's totally different, but we still have the same opportunity to support each other and help grow our organization. I think the challenge that TEMPO has, and I don't really call it a challenge, I don't think. It's just growing from where we are now. I think the strategic plan is a great step toward doing that, laying out those categories of what we need to do. I mean, I really would like to see TEMPO to be more than it is right now, the go-to organization. If someone wants to know something about women in leadership or hook up with a woman who's a leader, where do they think? Where do they go first? They think of TEMPO. And to me, that's a wonderful opportunity that we all have.
Great, thank you so much. I often get asked the question in the past couple months, so how did you get to be TEMPO board chair? And I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still working on my path and what it was. I would probably say how I got here is I became engaged in the organization. I raised my hand and I volunteered, and I got involved. But I'm curious if any of you, did you have a similar experience, or did somebody bring you in intentionally to be TEMPO president? I highly doubt, but I would like to hear a little bit more about how that went. Mary Ellen, how did you get to be TEMPO president?
Well, I think it was, not being afraid to volunteer and work at it, but I think it was because I was quite involved on some of the early mentoring activities, and that seemed to be one of the areas we were going to put a stake in the ground in terms of this was going to be core to who we were as an organization and as individuals, that we were going to celebrate annually mentors and through our annual event, but also what else were we going to do ourselves. And so I think that was probably the way that my path was somehow developed.
Great. Anybody else have a similar or different story? Peggy?
I think it says a lot about a women's organization, because I think that everyone comes together and says, we want you to be next. There was no specific time where I ever said I want to be president of TEMPO. I would sit in these luncheons and look at the women in awe and think, oh my goodness, the women who came before me. And it's just being involved and showing that you care about this community, not just about women, but about the community. Because hopefully there's that we are the go-to organization for everything, not just women-related. When someone has a question about policy, they come to us because the women who are part of this know about those things. And I think just being there and talking and being involved is what makes other people see. And there's no formal way that I've seen.
And I will just add that I think this is a very generous group that reaches out to others, and that's how I got it. Before 3 or 4 years before I became president, there was a person that reached out to me as I was doing a presentation. I was president of a board, and there was a TEMPO member in the audience, and she came up to me later and she said, do you know about TEMPO? And I said, no. And then she told me about it, and then she said, well, I think you'd be a good fit. And so then I explored it, and of course I was on the program committee and mentoring, and I got more involved, and all of a sudden she became president, and then I became president. So she very much reached out to me and engaged me, and I'm forever thankful for that. So I think there's a lot of people in this room I know that do the same thing for others.
Great, thank you. Mary Alice, quick question for you. Or maybe a longer question. I'll give you some liberties with this one, okay? The microphone's right there. How did your experience with TEMPO impact your professional career? Or did it?
It may have impacted me more personally in some important ways, and professionally, it still does. When I was a young woman working in broadcasting, I was on television a lot. I was on TV almost as much then as personal injury attorneys are now. So that creates a situation in which you go out in the community and people think they know you, but they don't know you. And they react to you as a personality as opposed to a person. Now, I'm not complaining. I was very blessed to have this wonderful career, but my goal was to be a leader in broadcasting, not to be an on-air personality. So when I came to TEMPO meetings, I was another business woman, learning from other business women who were dealing with far more complex issues than certainly I faced in my work, who were really brilliant, all smarter than I, and had far more sophisticated understandings of business. So I learned and learned and learned and learned and learned. But I also, you use the term safe. I felt so safe in the TEMPO meetings because my fellow TEMPO members knew me as Mary Alice, who works at WISN or at WTMJ, and not as this on-air person who is one-dimensional and not quite real. So as you can see, it had a profound impact on me personally and professionally. When I was tapped to be president of TEMPO. We used to laugh about the fact that it was my name, because there was Mary Lou, there was Mary Lee, there was Marilyn, and then Mary Alice. It made perfect sense. Right? So that's what qualified me to be president.
That's great, Mary Alice. Thank you so much. So thinking about our organization of all women, we certainly know we can't do this alone. It takes male advocates like Jim Miller, who was with us in our strategic planning, is here today, and I feel like he's with us every day in spirit, so thank you for that. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how we can get men involved in the conversation or as champions. And Marilyn, I'm going to toss that one to you. How do you think we can get more men involved in this and joining us in our journey?
I think several ways. Certainly looking for opportunities to have them speak to us or be on panels. There aren't any organizations that are only men anymore, but if there were, that would be a great opportunity. We tried having men members. A lot of you remember that. And for all the reasons that everyone said how much they love TEMPO the way it is, I think the men just did not really feel comfortable. Plus, there weren't a lot of them. So I think, so it was sort of a flip, a flip side. One of the things that I remember from back in the day, since I'm the oldest generation, when we were first getting started, we, the board, wanted to figure out a way that we could let our bosses, our CEOs, know about TEMPO, because they didn't really know what TEMPO was. They weren't thinking that they should be cognizant of women managers and promoting women managers. So Carla Butenhoff, who is here today, came up with the idea of a national speaker, which we called the Big Gun, meaning that would be someone really well known that we ended up having to pay a lot of money to, who would come to this national speaker luncheon, and we would all invite our CEOs, we would invite our bosses, so they could come and see what this group was all about, be exposed to other women that were executives and managers, and see what was going on, and hopefully start to get them thinking more along those lines. So one of the speakers we had was Irving R. Levine. We had George Gallup from the Gallup poll. We had someone from Wall Street Week. And I think the most impactful thing for me during my years as president and even as a TEMPO member was that first National Speaker Lunch when it was the year that I was president. So I stood up there on the stage and looked out, and here were our members with these CEOs who maybe a lot of these members the CEOs never even talked to them on a normal, regular basis. And here they all were, and I thought, wow, this is really fabulous.
Fantastic. Peggy, do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
And now you stand up there and you look out and half the women are CEOs. Yeah. So what a difference it's made, right? I mean, what has happened since the beginning is really a testament to all the leaders that are in this room that have helped TEMPO get to where it is. We've had so many conversations about how to get men involved. I remember when I first joined TEMPO, or first joined the board, and then up to when Jennifer was president and Tracy was our executive director, and we sat around the table and said, how do we get men involved? They need to be involved in the conversation. Was it an advisory council? And I think that we are seeing more men involved. I go to the TEMPO Mentor Awards, and I see men in the room. When I look around, I go to the leadership event, and there's men, and they're engaged. I remember when Nancy was president, she actually went around to male CEOs and videotaped their response to, do you know what TEMPO is? Can you explain to me what TEMPO is? And she really educated them on why TEMPO was here, why it was still needed, and I think that really helped in the community. I don't know if we still have those in the archives, but they were amazing videos to watch.
We'll have to dig those out. Yeah. So now I'm really curious. Only Nancy would do that. I love that. So we're going to do two kind of somewhat rapid fire questions, and we're going to go down the line, and then we're going to come back, okay? So the first is going to be, and everybody have a little bit of a second to think about this. The first question is going to be, what do you believe is your legacy with TEMPO Milwaukee? We were very intentional with putting this panel together, thinking about transformation and where we are as an organization. And for the most part, these women represent either a decade in TEMPO's time or a really transformational time in that. So we'll start with Mary Ellen. What do you believe is your legacy with TEMPO Milwaukee? And that question, by the way, came from the audience through text message.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So I think helping push the mentoring agenda forward in a broad sense. And then the other thing that came up was our definition at the time I was president, which was 96, was around to be a member you had to be full-time employed. And we had a lot of debates about how to define leadership, female leaders. And eventually we did that and opened that up and started opening up our own minds about that definition.
Well, one legacy I'll never forget was I was the first president to raise the dues. We raised the dues from $35 to $50, but we paid for the lunches separately. So, but I don't know what that's worth now in today's money, but it was very controversial because a lot of women were paying for this on their own and didn't have the company's support. So, but longer-term legacy, I think, is having been in the first decade, just being a part of the various aspects that makes TEMPO what it is today. Just the focus on networking and the mentoring and the lunches where we bring in CEOs and other speakers that we want to know about. So I feel like it was more laying the structure that has certainly evolved considerably, but it was getting TEMPO really going.
I was president when we started the leadership forums, so the annual fall leadership forums, and we talked about leadership and what it meant and why do people join TEMPO. It was networking, largely was networking. Some of it was learning and professional development, so we talked about leadership and what could we do more for leadership, and so we started that in fall. And I remember the first, they were expensive, but we got fighter pilots to come in and talk about, and the title was Flawless Execution. And they had some really good points, and a lot of it was about debriefing afterwards and learning from what you did. So it was impactful and it was expensive, but it's still here today in terms of the annual leadership conference.
I think we had 5 sponsors, and we raised $25,000. I would say that I'm flattered that you think that I was instrumental, but it started before me. It was a meeting where it was Amy Rizlov, Jennifer Bartolotta, and they said, close your eyes and imagine what we look like in 10 years. And that's what started the transformation, thinking that we could have a CEO that would lead our organization and that would be forefront as we move forward. So I think, and Linda obviously finished because we didn't have a CEO while I was here. So with Linda, underneath Linda's leadership, hiring a CEO and moving the organization forward.
Well, that's a little bit of a theme because at the time I was president, we were just establishing the fact that we were an organization that needed to have someone working for the organization to move everything forward. And that felt like a very big deal at the time to have this part-time person working with us.
Great. Final question, and we'll end it on a high note. What was your most energizing, exciting, or memorable TEMPO moment? I'll start with you, Mary Alice. If you want me to defer, and I can come back to you.
I think I had the privilege for a few years of emceeing the Mentor Awards. So I got to stand up there year after year and look at that crowd. And the pride was just overwhelming. It was so professional, and the people we honored were the best of the best. And the crowds were enormous, and those were really exhilarating moments for me.
I would say probably, I don't fashion myself a public speaker. I don't like to get up and talk in front of people. And I was absolutely terrified. And Jennifer knew that. So she started having me the year before get up at the end of every luncheon and have to talk. And the reaction that I would get from the crowd, even though I knew I was not doing a good job, Jennifer can get up and speak and she doesn't need a script and I have to bring a script everywhere. But the reaction that I received from the crowd, you did an amazing job, you know, welcome to the presidency, was an exhilarating moment for me, and it shows the sisterhood of the organization and what it means.
I have to say as well, the Mentor Awards, the TEMPO Mentor Awards, it's just so, it's amazing. It's the essence of what TEMPO is and what it does is to celebrate mentoring and giving of others for the betterment of the community. And so I remember it's the culmination of a lot of planning as well. And so I remember it was Kitty Brennan and Candy Walton was at that year we were celebrating. But it's just a tremendous feeling to celebrate people.
I would say the Mentor Awards also, but in addition to that, I think one of the things that stands out in my mind was our 40th anniversary event. I thought that was just such a special event for all of us to celebrate and reflect on what we've done and where we've going. It was very special.
I would say for me, it's, and I'm guessing for all of us, that I was president over 20 years ago, which just doesn't seem possible, but which all of a sudden you go, wow, 2 decades have passed. But what's so cool about this organization is it honors what got us here and who got us here, but it's not afraid to face today and our future and continue to change and get relevant, and the work with the emerging women leaders. And it's just so gratifying as a past leader to see that and see the vibrancy of the organization. So thank you for that.
Amazing, thank you. We have one more thing. We have one more. We have a question that came in from one of our past presidents, and the question was, may I please say something? So Jennifer Bartolotta. It was a question, it was valid.
So thank you. We've spent a lot of time talking about what an amazing organization is. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about is the heart of this organization. We talked about mentoring, we talked about being ambassadors, sponsoring, and what it's done for our careers. But I want to tell you a little story. I wasn't asked this question, but I want to tell you a story about my TEMPO moment. So Mary Ellis used to be the moderator for the Mentor Awards, and then that rule changed over the years. And when you're president or board chair, you have the honor of being able to recognize that year's winners. And the year that I was president, I couldn't do it because my husband had a kidney transplant and was in the hospital. And this amazing group of women who had come before me reached out to me and put their big arms around me, and they said, and Peggy gave up her chance to do it, and said, Jennifer, we want you to do it next year. Peggy said, you take my spot. You deserve to be able to recognize these members, and I will never forget this organization for that love.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that moment with us, and I think we can all understand the feelings and the emotions, and I think if we all think about our TEMPO moment, and I would encourage you to take a couple minutes as you walk out of here, think about your TEMPO moment, think about what this organization means to you, and how special it really is and how fortunate we all are to have one another. I am so grateful to this amazing panel. As I look forward to the next 2 years as board chair, I won't be president, I'm going to be board chair, so a little bit different role. I seek inspiration, and I get inspiration from all of you. I love your wisdom, I love the passion you have for this organization, and on behalf of our entire membership, we're entirely grateful for your service and dedication and for being here with us today. And we have a small gift for you. I want to say thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And just a couple, just 2 other quick things. We're going to do the drawing for the tickets to the U.S. Open. Also want to remind you all that the survey is going to be coming out. We read the survey every single month. We discuss it as a board and as a program committee, so we do take that feedback seriously. So please take a few moments to fill that out. And then with that, I think we are going to do the drawing. Jim, are you going to come up and do the drawing, or Jen? Jim and Jen? Oh, President.
How about you pick the card? How's that? Shake it up a little bit. And the winner is Carolyn Kreider. She left, but we will get it to her. Awesome.
She's back in the corner.
Oh, she's right there. Perfect. Carolyn, congratulations. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to all of our past presidents that are here. And everybody, have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for that.